Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. And we're continuing in our series looking at content in module number 4. And in this module, what we're really looking at is the question of ethics and managerial decision making. And one of the things that we want to look at here is a very important topic. You can see here in the title slide, organizational justice. Organizational justice. And I could have called this lecture organizational fairness as well. The term we typically use technically is organizational justice, but it is really the root idea. Do people view my company as just and fair, especially those who work within my company, my organization? We hope that after this video, you'll be able to define organizational justice and its 4 primary components and relate how perceived justice and fairness is the building block, the foundation of trust and loyalty with those you manage, and therefore why it is so crucial that you maintain justice and fairness. So, let us simply ask the basic question. What is it that your employees want? When you have a role of leadership and management within your company, within your organization, what do they want? Well, clearly one of, perhaps not the only, but one of the things they definitely want is they want to know that the organization they work for, the place where they are hanging their hat in their career, is just and fair. Will I be treated fairly? Will others around me be treated fairly? Will all stakeholders be treated fairly? So, this is, of course, the notion of fairness is something that dates back to when we were little kids, right? And the one thing that as little kids that we could smell a mile away, whether it was true or not, right, was perceived injustice. If we thought that we were not being dealt with fairly, either by our parents or by our teachers or by our friends or by anybody, right? Is it fair? Or is it fair? And of course, the great cry of children is what? That's not fair. That's the thing that brings out the ire and gets the dander up with anyone, from little kids to full-grown adults, and of course, especially with your employees. Am I being treated fairly, relative or compared to others? And of course, we need to put a finer point on that. So what do we mean specifically when we talk about organizational justice? There are at least 4 aspects that we really need to take time to define and take a look at. The first is distributive justice. And by distributive justice, you see the bullet point there, people's perceptions of the fairness with distribution of rewards. Now, that's worded very carefully, right? On the one hand, what we're talking about is the fairness of distribution of rewards. But what we're really talking about is not only is it fair, but do others perceive it to be fair? And of course, those of you who've been around the block a couple times, you realize those are 2 distinct different things, right? In other words, what people's perceptions of what's going on and what's really going on may be slightly or significantly different, but we're really dealing with this. As an employee, do I think this company distributes rewards in a fair and just manner? What are some typical examples of the kinds of matters that fall under this? What does somebody have to do to get a promotion? What does somebody have to do in the organization to earn a raise? Or were they given a raise because they're the nephew of the director of sales? How did they get that plum account? Were they assigned to that account because they're the most qualified woman or man for that job, or because of some other backdoor deal that was done at some restaurant? How does someone earn rewards, bonuses, promotions? Is it just? Is the procedure fair? How are rewards distributed? And that's one of the things that is obvious, right? It's obvious to others. Wait a minute. That person just got a promotion. We all heard about it. It was in the company newsletter. It was on the website. We got the email. But those of us who have worked with that person know that's kind of the last person we would have picked as being qualified for that promotion, qualified for that raise, qualified for that opportunity. And once word gets out, wait a minute, there's some other reason. Clearly, it's not because that person deserved the reward. What's the backlash? Management's not fair. They don't treat us fairly with justice. And that is an erosion of relationships within the company. Well, that's just the first one. The second one, procedural justice. It's an individual's perceptions of the fairness used to determine outcomes. What process is used to make a decision? Is the process fair? Is it consider all possible evidence? Is it fair in weighing out the process of how you come to reach a decision? What kinds of decisions? Well, decisions like where should we devote resources? Which department gets the larger part of discretionary budgeting? Who gets to champion particular efforts or campaigns within the business? Who really even gets to make decisions about particular outcomes? And if the perception is the process itself is not fair, is not balanced, is not even-handed, is doled out with particular favor or particular bias, well, then people stop trusting the process. Instead, they start asking, who do I have to butter up? Who do I have to kiss up to in order to get an advantage in the process of how outcomes are decided? That too will eventually lead to the erosion of trust. The third bullet point you see there, interpersonal justice, the fairness with which people see how others are treated. And this, of course, is interlaced with the previous two. You know that, right? And so, for instance, if you have a relatively young employee who's not married, doesn't have kids, and then the next thing you hear during the summer, this guy is starting to show up at the boss's son's t-ball games on Saturday afternoons, everybody in the department's going to start asking, wait a minute, does this guy just like t-ball? Or is there another reason why he's showing up at the Saturday afternoon t-ball games of the boss's son? Now, of course, that's a rather bold-faced example I'm giving you, right? We both know why that guy's showing up at the ball games, right? Now, on one hand, you can say he's free to do whatever he wants on a Saturday afternoon. That's not company time. But we can smell that one a mile away, right? Here's the thing. We raise our eyebrow if that guy, we hear he's showing up at the boss's son's baseball games. But here's the thing. What we're really waiting to see is how does the boss treat him Monday through Friday? Does he give him sort of special attention? Is he more chummy with that guy, right? Because then we start asking ourselves and others the same question, right? How fair is the boss? How fair does that lead to the distribution of rewards, promotions, raises, an assigned parking space in the company parking lot? You know what I'm talking about, right? All those kinds of questions come up. Now, there's one fourth one, informational justice, the perceived fairness in information used for decisions. And of course, nowadays, this is a hotter topic than ever, right? In the era of us now having doubts about whether or not we can trust the news that's popularly published in the media, to what degree is it accurate, to what degree is it biased at face value. And if you look at the slide, consider all of these things in your managerial career, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean, you may perceive yourself, you may view yourself as the most fair and balanced and even-handed manager that you know. You always try to be balanced and fair and just in how you distribute rewards, the processes you use to determine outcomes, how you treat all people around you, as well as how you determine which information you're going to use to make decisions. Where did that source come from? Am I going to check the evidence? You may perceive yourself to be very fair and just in this, but notice that's not what matters in these slides. What matters on this slide is how do others perceive you? Which means that even if you are the most balanced and even-handed, it is still possible that others may perceive you to be something less than fair, because possibly they're working on only partial knowledge, or they already have a prejudged bias, they don't like you as a person. For all sorts of reasons, people's perceptions about your fairness may be significantly different than how you perceive yourself. What does this mean? This means my best advice for you as a manager is you need to work extra hard to communicate that you are fair, that you are communicate in how you use the information, that you are fair in how you use the process that's balanced and without bias. You actually have to go out of your way to communicate this to everyone around you so that they have every ample reason to perceive that you are fair and just and even-handed. Really, isn't that a lot of extra work? In one sense, yes, it is a lot of extra work you have to go through. But more importantly, what you're doing is you are distributing the news that this company and my managerial decisions are fair. They're just. They're balanced. They have no bias. They are trying to do the very best thing for the organization and operating in an ethical way, which implies fairness and justice for all. This will have great benefit for you. And quite frankly, in the absence of the perception of organizational justice, what happens? What if you don't work extra hard and make sure that people perceive you are dealing above board? What happens when people perceive that you are not fair, they will reach the conclusion that you are not ethical, that you, well, perhaps that your favor can be purchased, that you operate with a certain sense of bias and favoritism. And when those things happen and they conclude that you are not fair and therefore you are not ethical, you can tell from the slide what happens. Ethics destroys trust in you as a manager. And if they don't trust you, well, let me just ask a question. How easy is it for you to be loyal to someone that you don't trust? How easy is it for you to work dedicated and passionately for someone that you don't trust? How easy is it for you to take on difficult assignments and put out the extra effort and work longer and harder than anyone else when you have a boss that you don't trust? Exactly. Lapses in ethics, even the perceived lapses in ethics, destroys trust. And that destroys performance. And that is why if you can build a history of fair treatment, that leads to building trust and loyalty and performance with the people you manage. That's really how these things all string together. And so we hope that you will be able to really sense that those 4 aspects of organizational justice really do matter in building up the reputation and a history of justice and fairness, and therefore leads to encouraging as a foundation for trust and loyalty among those you manage. It really is that important. And it isn't enough for you to make good, sound decisions. It's also important for you as a manager to communicate your thinking and how you reach those conclusions with key people around you. That way, a reputation builds, a history builds, a track record is built, and the track record will lead to building a foundation of loyalty and trust with those that you lead and those that you manage. It really is that important. That's why we give it to you in this particular video. We hope this has been helpful. A little bit more on this in the text. We hope that we'll see you in the next lecture.